Good day, folks. I'm back here with you guys for another league. This time I've asked the Blue-Red Delver Discord what they wanted me to play, since I've been interacting with them a lot in the past years, and it's generally been a very good community to be a part of. Not surprisingly, they voted for just stock Blue-Red Delver. They wanted to see how I played with the deck and to have see my thoughts on attacking the Snoko deck in particular. They've asked me to do a couple of leagues with Blue-Red Delver. I will be iterating the list I play during these leagues, and I'll now give you a quick introduction to the list I'm going to play today. Just a short introduction to how the deck is built and why I'm playing it the way I am. I'll try to do a couple of leagues, like at least 4 with Blue-Red Delver variants between now and the time that Kaldheim comes out, which I'm doing my reviews for in the meantime. But when Kaldheim comes out, I'm probably going to test all kinds of new cards and brews. So between now and then, I'm going to try to do some Blue-Red Delver for you guys. You fine folks, I must say. So to go into the deck, what you see on your screen here are what I consider the core of Blue-Red Delver, which consists of 19 lands, including 4 wastelands and 9 fetches. In the past, there's been a lot of Delver decks that went on 18, but I think it's been generally accepted right now that 19 is the right number of lands. Especially if you want to include a mountain, since that gives us 5 non-blue sources, and I'd never go beneath 14 blue sources. So you could go lower, but that means you're cutting on utility lands and not on the main sources. Then we have 11 cantrips. Since the release of Arcanist, I've been telling people that I would play at least 11 cantrips. I've been advocating for this quite a lot. It seems to be generally accepted these days that 11 is the general guideline to go with. Recently there have been a bunch of lists with 12 cantrips, and that's mostly because of high numbers of cards like Sprite Dragon that gives us more payoff for chaining them together. But I think 11 is just the baseline I would always start with. Then we have 5 removal spells. I think the 4 lightning bolts are a given, but it's very important to be able to address opposing Dreaded Arcanist, but also to be able to use our own Arcanist to close out a game. And being able to hit for 7 damage in the last turn by bolting our opponent's face and flashing it back is very important. So I would always have the first 5 3 damage spells. In the past we've seen a lot of 2 damage spells in these slots as well, in addition to the lightning bolt. But with the 3 toughness of Arcanist, I think you shouldn't play stuff that deals less than 3 damage. Then we have the creatures. I think these are just the core 8 you can't go without, like 4 Delver of Secrets, 4 Dreaded Arcanist. These are just the cards that make our deck work, and from there you can add a lot more, because I think you should have at least 13. I like having 13 exactly creatures. 14 is something also a lot of people use, but especially when we're upping the number of cantrips, I like having 13 for sure. And then we have 10 pieces of stack interaction, basically. I think the 4 Force Wills and 4 Dazes, nobody will argue with you that those are the ones you need. And it's been proven recently in Legacy that having access to Force of Negation makes a lot of these decks a lot stronger, as it gives you a lot more options in the turns you tap out. So I like having 2. I think the second Force of Negation isn't necessary, but I really like having it. So these are the cards I would consider that, well, any Delver variant should start with. Then These are the things the cards I think are just good enough to add to the deck just to have a baseline. I like having the 11 counters, piece of counter magic here, and the 6 Chain Lightning, just because of how popular Dreadnought Arcanist is. Gives us a bit of additional reach, but also just gives us more outs to our opponent's Dreadnought Arcanist. And I think the first Brazen Borer gives us too much utility not to include. So even if you're building a more aggressive variant or more controlling variant, I think that if you're playing straight blue-red, at the moment I would always include the first Borer. These are 56 cards. From here, we've seen a lot of recent decks go to 3 or 4 Sprite Dragons, and then usually adding the 12th cantrip. Sprite Dragon is a good card, don't get me wrong. I like it. It's good against decks like Elves, against especially the non-white Snow decks. It's very good against, and some other damage-based decks. It's also pretty good against Rock Delver, which is a reason that it's pretty popular at the moment to go for the Sprite Dragon build. I've been seeing quite a lot of Swords of Plowshares and stuff recently, which is the kind of card I don't really like the Sprite Dragon against. So for me, the version I like at the moment the most is a version that has Young Pyromancer still instead of the Sprite Dragons, which gives us a lot more value in the face of Swords of Plowshares while still being pretty decent at brushing Planeswalkers, and it's a lot better against Icewind, Kotal, and Baleful Strix. So that's one of the reasons I like Young Pyromancer. I think it's just a card you can't really go wrong with. It also snowballs pretty well with Dreadnought Arcanist, and the same goes for Ethereal Forager. This is, let's say, the 5th Dreadnought Arcanist. It has a lot more synergy with our forces, and it's just a good card overall. It is very weak against Lightning Bolts. So, for these changes thus far, we're basically playing a couple of creatures that are a bit less good versus Rock Delver specifically, but I think they do give us more play against a lot of the other decks. And at the moment, I think the metagame share of Rock Delver isn't so big that we should always play a deck that's optimized to beat them. Then I would normally add either a Brazen Borer or the Ethereal Forager as the last creature, but I wanted to try out Seasoned Pyromancer for this league. It's been doing a lot of work in Modern recently, and I think it's just a pretty good card to have in the main board of our deck. One of the things that the Snow decks kind of struggle with is just a lot of small bodies, and especially things that also gives us value. I think it's just a pretty decent card. When we're ever, if we can get to in the spot that gives us Hellbent, it does a good Bedlam Reveler impression. But it doesn't force us to discard our entire hand. So when we're loaded on, when we have a board state, when we're ahead on board and we have Force of Will in our hand, it doesn't force us to get rid of that and have fresh cards, which was one of my main problems with Bedlam Reveler. So I think this card is a lot more versatile in that way. Obviously, the kind of deck it's a lot worse against is against combo decks, but to have it in the main board, I think is fine. We have 6 removal spells we can pitch to it in the main board just to rummage them away and get new cards. And post board, I want to board out creatures anyway, just because we bring in a lot more interaction and don't want to cut any of our cantrips, and there are only that many bolts we have to cut. So I'm usually looking to cut 1 or 2 threats in a lot of unfair matchups, let's say, and I think Seasoned Pyromancer is therefore fine to have and just board out in those matchups. I really like what it theoretically offers against fair mid-range decks. So I really wanted to try this. Um, then for the sideboard, what you'll see here is that I have 16 cards. And that is because I don't think that Wasteland is in a great position at the moment. I think it's a fine card. I think it's still one of the things that makes this deck work. I think it's just a lot less important at the moment. So what I want to do is go down to 3 Wastelands and then add the Carcass to the main board. I've been doing this quite a lot recently in variants with Quark, for example, where we have some more synergy of ourselves with the Carcass, and I really liked it. There's just a bunch of matchups where the Carcass is super impactful and just offers a lot of utility. So even though it doesn't interact with our own cards, it's still just one of the most powerful lands ever printed, even if it's off color. So I wanted to try that in the main board, which also frees up a sideboard slot. I think it's pretty good at the moment to try it like this. Then for the sideboard, we have a Flush Storm and a Null Rod against stuff like Storm or artifact-based combo decks. The Null Rod is also good. And in the spot where I usually had Narset, I now have a Hull Breacher. I just want to get more games in with the Hull Breacher. I'm still of the opinion that Narset might be better for this deck, just because it's a lot better against Snowco, getting the value by minusing it and getting cards back. But I think Hull Breacher is also just a good card, so I wanted to try it out a bit more. Then we have 2 Rage, which are arguably the most versatile and powerful sideboard cards we have access to. They solve a lot of our issues. They're a bit too clunky to run more than 2, but the first 2 are just save so many games. And I have 2 Sweepers. I think at the moment, with the popularity of Elves, a bit of the resurgence in then Texas, and stuff like that, I want to have 2 Sweepers. I think both Blazing Volley, Electrickery, and Rough Tumble, all 3 of those are good options at the moment. I'm going for Blazing Volley now because I just like the efficiency of it, and in this particular build I'm running a bunch of Pyromancers, both young and seasoned, which makes Rough a bit worse for us, since it also deals 2 damage to our own non-flying creatures. If I was on the Sprite Dragon build of the deck, I would probably go for 1 Blazing Volley, 1 Rough. But for this build, I like the double Blazing Volley, just to be more efficient. Then we have some Graveyard Hate in Surgical Extraction and Relic. I think 3 pieces is relatively soft on Graveyard Hate. But I've also noticed that because of the amount of free counters we have, a lot of the graveyard decks are already pretty much covered with a lot of soft interaction there. So we don't need that many dedicated spots to it. If you really want to target a deck like Hogak or something like that, then you would really need more, because Arcane spells just don't interact that favorably with them. But I'm just going with 2 dedicated anti-graveyard cards in the 2 surgical extractions, and then 1 Relic of Progenitus, which I've been really been liking against Euro and Glottis, both of which still see quite a lot of play. I think it nicely interacts with both of those, and it's just a card we can bring in against snow decks without really feeling bad about bringing in something that interacts with the graveyard. Then we have the Submerge. Submerge has lost quite a bit of value at the moment, mostly because of Thomas Happ, Negator 77 as he's known on MTGO. He's been promoting, or basically having good results with Rainbow Depths, which is basically taking the forest out of the main Marlaga deck, so the Submerge no longer works against those Marlaga variants. That being said, I still think there are more green versions of the deck, which Submerge works decently against. But one of the reasons I just like Submerge is it's just such a good card if it works. Like against elves, against green mid-range decks, stuff like that. Just when it's on, when you get to play it for free, it's just such a good and powerful card. It helps so much with our tempo strategy. In the past, I've run 4 Submerges whenever I thought they were decently positioned, because it's my favorite card, but it also is one of the most powerful cards we can play. So I'm still having the one Submerge, though there's a good reason at the moment to go for something like Vapor Snag instead. But that card's just so much worse. Then the 3 Pyroblast, I don't think you can leave home without those. I wouldn't go under 3, it's just a very powerful way to interact with cards like Oko, Show and Tell, and everything like that. I also like having a large amount of these post-board against the other Delver decks, especially against the Sprite Dragon variants, since there it hits not only the 1 mana threats, but also the higher mana threats, which is one of the reasons that Sprite Dragon isn't always all that great. And it alleviates a lot of pressure off of our Lightning Bolts and Chain Lightning, so we can keep those around for the Dreadhorde Arcanists. So I think you should just play 3, it's just a great card. And then I have one card here that's not really something I would recommend as a stock list. But I am going to try out the Royal Silence. I have had quite a bit of fun and success with this in the past when it just released after Eldraine. I think it does quite a lot again in certain matchups, but it's a card I really want to test and see how it holds up in the 2020-2021 meta. I like what it does versus Oko. If your opponent resolves an Oko and pluses on your Dreadhorde Arcanist, for example, you can cast your Royal Silence +2/+0 on your 3/3 Elk, and then just attacking for 5 damage, killing the Oko while still leaving the Royal Silence around for them to have to answer. It also, if they don't Elk your creature, but make an Elk of their own to stop your Dreadhorde Arcanist from attacking, you give your Dreadhorde Arcanist +2/+0 on first strike, which means it can attack into the Elk. You can get value from your Dreadhorde Arcanist in the face of 3/3s then. And both of its abilities, it starts at a high loyalty, and both of its abilities go up. So it's hard for a lot of decks to get it off the board very easily. And if you do get to the ultimate, it's just very powerful. Drawing 4 cards and then taking something out or dealing like 5 to 7 damage against your opponent usually means you just win the game. It's not the strongest card, but it has its situations, and I really wanted to try it for this league. It's a fine card against Oko decks. It's a fine card against fair creature decks where the second ability can let your Dreadhorde Arcanist attack without your opponent expecting that it gets to attack. And it's also like a 2 damage per turn clock that you get to add onto your Delver, for example, which means you get 2 hasted damage. Normally I would have a Narset in this spot, probably. Or a Vapor Snag in addition to the Submerge if you want to have a bit more interaction with the depth decks. And you could also run something like Blood Moon there if you like that, though I'm not a big fan of Blood Moon at the moment. So that's basically the flex slot, but I just really wanted to try the Royal Silence for a league and see how it does, if it still holds up in the current meta, and how it works for me. So then that is basically the deck I'm going to run. This is definitely not the only way to build this, and I'm definitely trying a couple of cards out. I think the Sprite Dragon builds also have a lot going for them, but for this league I wanted to try out this version. So let's see if we can get some wins in here, and I'll see you for the rounds.